He sees you when you're sleeping. This, of course, a 2024 Christmas horror movie directed by Charlie Steeds. It stars Caroline Williams and David Lennox. Lennox actually wrote the movie as well. Now, Charlie Steeds is quite a prolific B-movie director. Most of his stuff I kind of enjoyed to a large degree, but some of his stuff is a little mixed, you might say. How does this one compare, and what's it all about? So it focuses on Lennox's character, who in the 60s we see when he was a child witnessed a individual dressed up as Santa Claus murder his parents, and he's kind of traumatized by this and is institutionalized. And 20 or so years later, he's out and going back to his family home, which now has his auntie and cousin living in it. And there's a little bit of family animosity, you might say. Now, Lennox's character is troubled, you know, he's been institutionalised, and he obviously has a little bit of a phobia when it comes to Christmas iconography, in particular the Father Christmas kind of effigy. So, you know, he's a little bit kind of on edge, you might say, but these killings start again, and we have a killer dressed up as Santa Claus piling up the bodies. Is this kind of escaped lunatic from an asylum? Is it something else? What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let us discuss what I think works in this movie's favour. So yeah, it's kind of somewhat of a run-of-the-mill slasher with a kind of lick of Christmas paint, I suppose. So if you are a fan of slasher movies, there is quite a high body count here. And I do think the kills, although not explicit, are done relatively well. For example, we have a couple of scenes where our Santa killer is using like an axe or something like that, or a pickaxe. And you do feel like there's some heft to it. I think they do portray when it's hitting someone, this is coming down with some force and it's heavy. So I actually do think some of the kills, although not especially gory, do seem somewhat kind of brutal and you know, and kind of deadly. And they do try and mix it up with a couple of different kind of deaths in regards to having a little bit of variety in the way that this guy kind of dispatches them. I do think there's also some nicely shot scenes. There's a couple of sequences where you see this kind of Santa Claus figure kind of like come out the darkness, and we kind of see to sort of show his you know, himself, and you know, I think it's pretty cool. Kind of when he comes out the darkness, obviously the kind of the Santa sort of outfit and stuff you probably associate mostly with positive things, but in this instance they do a good job of kind of making it look kind of quite menacing in those sequences. So I kind of quite like that. So some stuff like the cinematography I thought was you know, quite well done, certainly in those kind of sequences. And although yes, we have obviously seen a killer Santa before, I think the idea is probably quite a solid one. And there's quite a good intro in this movie as well, where we have a younger sort of character, a young version of the character being told this Christmas story by his uncle, and it's kind of like a Christmas horror story. And the guy who plays like the uncle, I thought was quite fun sort of character and stuff, and it's totally something I would do. So I appreciated that. On a technical level, I think it's, you know, relatively well put together. Charlie Steeds now, you know, a very sort of veteran director in regards to making lower budget horror films. So it's consummately put together on a kind of technical level. What doesn't work for me, to be honest with you, this movie I found so flavourless and generic. To be quite frank, as I say, on a technical level, I think it's kind of well put together. But on a sort of like a artistic level or an entertainment level, I found it sort of somewhat valueless. The script, and again this is actually written by David Lennox, is just so generic. You know, we have this guy, he's got his family that is scheming behind his back and kind of want to do him out of the you know, his inheritance and things, and everyone is just playing such a cliche. It's quite it's just so typical. It's just that there's just so it feels like there's very little thought put behind it. You know, there's no one here that will surprise you in regards to character motivations. Everyone here is such a broad personality, such a broad stereotype. And I have to say, even characters that are meant to be somewhat kind of sympathetic, including our main character played by Lennox, he still comes across as a little bit of a unlikable character at times, it must be said. So, you know, it's that. Now, I've kind of mentioned, I think some of the kills are relatively well done, but at the end of the day, it isn't anything you haven't seen before, and it isn't a particularly kind of gory film. The low budget aesthetic does kind of show through. Even the kind of the Santa suit, I didn't think was the strongest. It's like a very kind of like wispy beard and stuff. It doesn't look like they've kind of gone full on with a particularly kind of full image of the big man, you might say. The acting, I think, is a little hammy at times, a little bit overcooked. It feels like a kind of somewhat of a pantomime. Maybe that was the intention, this being a kind of a Christmas horror film, but I have to say I thought the performances were a little overblown here. The story I didn't think was particularly kind of engaging, and it just follows that sort of template what we've seen far too many times, and is taking parts from other horror films, you know, and just kind of doing it again on a lower budget. I mean, like I said, there's quite, at this point, quite a lot of kind of Christmas-related horror films, and even just slasher films in general. I just didn't really feel like it had much of its kind of own identity, to be honest, and it ends up being a somewhat competently put together movie for a kind of a low budget affair, but completely unmemorable, and actually somewhat just exactly, it will play out how you're going to think, and there'll be no sort of, nothing really here that will be memorable in any type of way. I'm going to say this movie is about 4 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.